Hey, book girlies. I promise I'm Sarah.
Hey, gamer guys. It's Ian.
And you're listening to a pod of sass and sarcasm. I just feel like it's pertinent to say this because I feel like the last time we recorded you were still sick. And that was weeks ago. But now I am sick and it's been a fun time. At least we're recording today and not, Wednesday, that I sounded quite terrible. So, played any good games recently?
Yeah, I've been playing the critically acclaimed game, Elden Ring.
Who's the critic, you?
I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it got Game of the Year the year it came out.
You don't even appreciate my jokes. I see how it is. I'll just leave. Okay, so tell me about Elden Ring.
Elden Ring is in a genre we haven't talked about before. It is a Souls game, or a Soulsborne game.
I'm waiting for an explanation because you do this. You always act like you're doing all these mic drops and shit, but it's only a mic drop if I get it, and I don't.
No, I'm just gathering my thoughts while speaking.
You're like, it's a Soulsborne game. And then I'm supposed to go, ooh.
So it's got, what the heck is that?
Well, this was going on in my head, but I feel like people are getting tired of hearing me say, what the fuck is that? Tell me about, what is this? Okay, so what is a Soulsborne game?
It's a little difficult to describe.
Because the anger that I have right now.
The company that produced this game, and kind of, I don't want to say invented this genre, but they definitely were they perfected the genre, or the one that popularized this genre. So it got assigned to them because their first game was Demon Souls, then it was Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, and Elden Ring is their latest installment. Yeah, so every game that plays like this game is called a Souls-like. And to put it into context for you, to some game genres we've talked about before, is it's kind of like a roguelike game and a boss fight game at the same time.
Okay, so roguelike, if I'm remembering correctly, is the type of game where you can just kind of go and explore stuff, and there is sort of a storyline, but you don't always have to stick to the storyline kind of thing? Or remind me what roguelike is, because you're shaking your head.
Well, because roguelike isn't a very good descriptor for what it is, but it's the closest thing that we've talked about before.
No, I know, but I'm trying to put it into perspective.
Roguelike are games where if you die, kind of lose progress, and then you go back to usually the start menu and just do the whole run again. And you gradually build up your power so you can go further and further. The reason it's not quite like that is because this is a static world, and you have the opportunity to recover your currency if you do die. But if you die twice, it's gone.
Now that you've kind of explained the mechanics of the game, what is the game about?
I didn't pay very good attention to this, but I will try my best.
What do you mean? You're literally playing it. How are you not able to tell me what it's about?
Because it's very convoluted.
Is it a mystery?
It's just not explained very well. So the overall world premise is, I don't know if you're in a specific place or if you're in a between world.
Okay. So you're either in a fantasy world or in purgatory, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But not quite. You're not dead, are you?
Yes.
You are?
Purgatory would be the best choice to use here.
Okay.
Yeah. Because something has happened to the gods and the royalty, the royal gods, where it has been broken. Their source of power is now broken, and it is scattered between several bodies.
Bodies like
several people.
Is it just in people, or is it in other creatures, or is it in objects?
I think it's in just people.
Okay, so it's not quite like the Horcruxes in Harry Potter, but like a similar-ish vibe as far as like it's broken into several pieces, and like is there like a goal to get those pieces back together?
Yeah, it's your goal as the Tarnished to go and collect all these greater pieces.
And who gave you this job?
The source of power itself, it seems, because you wake up in fog, in not even like in the Between Lands. You wake up in fog and then you arrive there.
Weird. Okay.
So you are just the latest poor creature to arrive on these lands, and you are able to perceive the divinity of these pieces.
So it's like as you're just going along doing your own thing, you see somebody like glowing green and or whatever, and then you're like, ah, they are divine.
It's more like you're kind of like an undead, because usually how all these games start is you wake up in a pile of corpses as just a random corpse.
Wait, you say these games as in, is it all the games from the same company that
Yeah,
do that?
pretty much.
Who's running this company? That is fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. It's dark fantasy.
I like dark fantasy, but like that's a pattern, and that's a fucked up pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It's really freaky. This guy needs therapy.
Well, you're a different entity in each game.
It doesn't matter. That literally doesn't matter. You wake up in a pile of corpses. Did this man at one point in his life wake up in a pile of corpses? Maybe he needs to talk about it.
I believe George R.R. Martin assisted with the writing of this
George R.R. Martin, get the fuck out of here.
this latest game.
Okay. George. God damn it, George.
So that's kind of like the premise and your purpose being there. And so it's like a rundown high fantasy setting. There used to be grand buildings, magic, and all this craziness going on. But since everything is now like dead, everything's just fallen apart.
So like the buildings and everything is like run down.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, where like it's not just like the people are kind of dead, but it's like the place itself is kind of dead. That's interesting.
Yeah, like everything there is just kind of like fucked up in some way.
And have you been playing this by yourself, or are you playing it with the boys?
Just by myself. It's the game I've been either playing on the Steam Deck in bed or occasionally on the computer. But you can play with others in like, I don't know if you can choose specifically who you bring in, because I haven't really played with it very much. Mm-hmm. And then other players can invade your world, and their goal is to try to kill you.
So like I could log on potentially and go into your world somehow and try to kill you?
Mm-hmm.
Why would I want to kill you?
I don't know. But if I killed someone that invaded, and I got like an item from their body.
And how did you know that was another person and not just like a computer-generated thing?
Because it says blank user has invaded your realm.
Oh.
And then they appear as like a red spirit.
Oh, that's fun. I kind of like that.
It's a little annoying when you're playing, because you're like, oh great, I was in the middle of doing something else, and here's another issue to deal with.
Can they invade your realm when you're not playing?
No.
Okay. Because that would be really fucked up, because then you're like, I always have to be on there so that if I get invaded, I don't fucking die.
No, you don't really lose anything if you die, but you have to go and recover your body. Because after they kill you, they leave.
I love how that just sounds like a chore. God damn it, I have to go get my body back. Fuck. So you can't do anything without your body?
Well, if you had like currency on you, you have to go back and get it.
And what good is currency in a world where everything is dead?
That's how you level up your character. So like,
of course it is. Of course. Just get rich and then you can level up.
Yeah. In the previous games, you collected souls. In this one, it's runes.
Oh, okay. So it's not like actual money. It's like just certain things. Okay.
But the mechanic is you gain
You
money
use it like
and
a
you use
currency,
it to... Yeah. And in this one, you need a maiden to help you level up. And in the first part of the game, you're resting, and then someone comes up and goes, but you are maidenless.
You ain't got no hoes here.
You ain't got no hoes to level you up.
Oh my god.
I'll be your pseudo hoe.
Ew. Does that person be like, I'll suck you off? Like, what does that mean?
No, they'll be your maiden.
When you said it to me, I was envisioning a very small man saying this, being like, you have no hoes. I'll be your hoe for you. And I'm like, sir, I didn't want you here. I still don't know how I feel that you need maidens for that, but whatever.
I just thought it was funny. I was like, because I think you can go pretty far because you can refuse her. And I don't know if you get another opportunity to.
What happens if you don't level up?
You just stay the same level.
So can you just like not achieve your goals then?
You can beat the game.
So then what's the purpose of leveling up? Just to be cooler?
So it makes it way easier.
You're not in for the challenge?
Hell no. The game's punishing enough as it is.
Punishing, that's funny for being in purgatory.
It's just all the games that this company comes out there. They're like absurdly punishing.
Well, I do have a lot to talk about, so we can't spend the whole time talking about this game.
It's just a very good game.
It sounds like it. But can I get into the book?
Yeah, let's finish off this book.
Okay, so I again don't really have notes, so there's gonna be a lot of me pausing and saying, but here's where we're at. We have finished The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah, and obviously with the last 2 episodes, I think we also mentioned I had already had it finished, but when I had written the notes for those episodes, I hadn't finished it yet, so I typed out those notes and I was, making my decisions, and then I went through and I finished it, and then we recorded and all that kind of stuff. So I've had this book finished for quite some time, and then you and I just got really busy in the last couple weeks and we couldn't record this ending. But this is going to be a little bit different because it is just going to mostly be you and me talking about it, and no passages have been pulled for it just because, 1, they're kind of difficult passages to talk about, and 2, it's like 12 chapters worth, and so we have a lot to get through in hopefully 1 episode. So we're finishing, what have you, The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. And this is a story about World War II. Isabel Rossignol was living in Paris with her dad when the Germans invaded, and she was sent to live with her sister Vienne in Caravo, and Vienne's daughter Sophie also lived there. And then very quickly after that, Captain Wolfgang Beck of the Nazi Party also started living there, so it was a little bit of a party there. Isabel was, for obvious reasons, very angry and upset and rebellious about this whole situation. She joined the Free French movement, moved back to Paris, where her dad was also working with the Free French movement. He was working to forge papers. She had started as a courier there, but then very quickly shifted gears into becoming the Nightingale, this escape route person. She would guide downed airmen from the Allied countries over the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain so that they can be then guided out of Spain and back to their home countries, which is all very dangerous work, but for her, it was always worth the risk. For Vienne, she was left alone with Captain Wolfgang Beck, and there was some real awkward tension between the two of them because the two of them definitely fancied each other, but obviously weren't going to act on those feelings. And also, Vienne had a hard time figuring out how to rebel, or even if she should rebel, because it was just, she was never the person to make decisions. She always deferred to other people. But that all changed when Vienne's best friend's daughter was killed and her best friend was arrested and taken to a concentration camp. Vienne was like, this is no time to be idle. I can't just stand by and watch this thing happen. I don't want my daughter to grow up in a world where good people let bad things happen and don't do anything to try to stop it. So she wanted to rebel, but again, wasn't really sure how. Part of her rebellion, though, did start with she decided to take care of Rachel's son, Ari. She adopted him. Beck got him false papers that said his name was Daniel and that her cousin had given birth and then died, and that she adopted him from that. And then the last time that we talked, Isabel was on her way to this secret meeting in Caravo where she was going to meet up with Henri and Gaëtan and Didier about something. She didn't know what. And on her way to the meeting, an American plane was shot down over the airfield near Vienne's home. Isabel found the pilot and decided it was going to be the best option to hide him in Vienne's cellar in the barn while Henri and Gaëtan and Didier figured out how to get her out of this little pickle. In the meantime, Vienne discovered Isabel was hiding in the barn and blew a gasket and was like, don't you ever come back here. How dare you endanger me and Sophie like this? You're so selfish and impetuous, and I never want to see you again, basically. But of course, that was pretty short-lived because then Captain Beck also found Isabel hiding in the barn. He shot at her, she shot at him, Vienne hit him in the head with a shovel, and he died. And that's basically where we left off, was now Captain Beck is dead in Vienne's barn. Isabel is dying. She's bleeding out and had collapsed. And at that same time, Gaëtan, Didier, and Henri had come back to try to get the pilot out who had passed. And Gaëtan is like, I can bring her to the free zone. And Vienne's like, over my dead body. And she like threatens him and is like, she was like, you don't think I can like fuck you up, man? I killed Captain Beck and I liked him. So don't you mess with me. You're not taking my sister anywhere, or at the very least, I'm coming with you. And he's like, fine, then come with me. That was where we last left off. Okay. The next chapter opened up with the old woman again. The last we had heard from the old woman was, quite some time ago, and she had been moved into her assisted living facility, and she'd been invited to this reunion in Paris that was basically for people who helped other people in the war. Mm-hmm. This scene, she is not sure if she wants to go to that reunion, because the last time, again, she was like, how could I go to that without remembering all the things I did, the man I killed, the one I should have? And so we've been going back and forth about who this old lady is, because there's some controversy over if it's Vienne who killed Beck or if it's Isabel who killed Beck, because Isabel shot him and Vienne hit him in the head with a shovel. So they both kind of had a hand in killing him. We're not really sure what he died of. And so this woman's like, I don't know if I want to really go to that. And so she's like, I'm not going to go. That's what the scene is about. Then she gets a phone call, and it's, this kind of chipper sounding young woman being like, hey, we were just wondering if you got the invitation. And she's like, oh, I got it. And the woman's like, so are you coming? And the woman's like, it's tomorrow night. No, I'm not coming. And the woman's like, oh, but we really think that people are going to want to hear from you and people are going to want to see you. And she's like, no, they want to see the Nightingale. They want to see Juliette Gervais, and she hasn't existed for a long time. Mm-hmm. And the woman sounds kind of disappointed, but she's like, okay, I understand. And then the old woman thinks for a second. She's like, on second thought, I'll be there tomorrow. And so she hangs up the phone, calls her son, leaves a message, and says, I'm going to Paris. Bye. And packs a bag and goes off to Paris. So if we're thinking okay, who is this old woman? Because last time I was really like, it might be Vienne, because there were more and more things that were coming out that made me really question, maybe it's Vienne and not Isabel that the old woman is, because I've also been saying that I think Isabel's going to die at some point, and I don't think it's from this gunshot wound, but who knows?
No, it's to build suspense.
It's
a plot device.
And so that, to me, I was like, that's such Isabel behavior, though, of I'm not going to go. You know what? Actually, on second thought, hell yeah, I am in. I was like, that's such Isabel behavior, and I love it. Okay, so then the next scene opens up, and it's Vienne and Gaëtan with Isabel in the back of their cart in a coffin, which is really fucked up, but she's in a coffin for safe transport over to the border. Mm-hmm. And Vienne's questioning Gaëtan. You have a question. Where
are the children?
I said that last time.
Because it wasn't that late.
It was 10 o'clock at night.
Well.
It was 10 o'clock at night because they'd been put to bed.
Yeah, and the daughter and the son now didn't go, what was that really loud noise right outside my bedroom?
Well, okay, it's in the barn, and from the sounds of it, this property is a lot bigger than I was expecting it to be, because they were talking about, so he went past the pergola, and then there were all the chickens and stuff, and then he hiked up a hill and stuff like that to get to the barn. And like, so it sounds like the barn, while yes, still on the property, is a little bit bigger than I was expecting it to be.
It's a gun.
I understand it's a gun.
They are very loud.
But it's also wartime, and they probably also heard the plane crash in the airfield nearby and probably are like, it's probably something to do with that. I get where you're coming from. That was also an oversight that I was not happy about with Kristin Hannah, because she doesn't explain what happened to the kids.
Where are the kids?
The kids are apparently still asleep. Who the fuck knows?
Who the fuck knows? How much time has passed now?
Hours. So... so Vienne and Gaetan are sitting in a wagon. Isabel's passed out in a coffin in the back seat, basically. And Vienne is questioning Gaetan because when she first met him, she's like, oh, I remember you. Isabel talked about you when she first got here. You're like the jackass who left a note pinned to her chest like a dog. No, I don't trust you and whatever. And so I was like, maybe this is the man. If Vienne was the old woman, I'm like, maybe Gaetan's the man she should have killed if she believes that she killed Beck. So they're talking, and as they're talking, Vienne realizes that Gaetan loves Isabel and that he genuinely would do anything for her. And she tries to tell him, she's like, you should let her know that you love her. And he's like, I could say the same thing to you because you've clearly never let Isabel know that you love her. And she's like, that's a different matter. But because I haven't been able to tell Isabel that I love her and that, you know, our father hasn't been able to do that and nobody's been able to do that, you really should, because she needs somebody. And he's like, I don't really want to tell her that I love her because I'm afraid that once I do, I'm going to lose her. And she's like, okay, I can understand that, whatever. I don't know how she understands that. But then they get to the free zone. He crosses and she's like, take care of Isabel or I will fucking kill you. If she dies, I will kill you. And he's like, understood. And she walks home. That's that scene.
Question. What did they do with the Nazi's body?
Didier and Henri took care of it.
Okay.
And they took care of the motorcycle as well.
Okay. I vaguely remember them assigning duties.
Yeah. So she walks home, and when she gets there, Beck is gone, Henri and Didier are gone, the motorcycle is gone, and it's just Sophie and Ari. I can't remember because it has been weeks since I finished this, but I can't remember if Sophie was awake when she got there or not, but she was like, okay, I can handle this. I can do this. In the following days after she gets home, she was waiting and waiting and waiting for the Nazis to come looking for Beck. Because remember, he's a captain.
Mm-hmm.
He's a pretty important guy.
Yeah, he was in charge of this whole search for the pilot.
Mm-hmm. And he was very concerned that he was going to be blamed for not being able to find the pilot and that he was going to be severely punished. So there's somebody that not only needs him, but like is looking for the pilot. So that day does eventually come. And Vienne tells Sophie to go take Ari to the upstairs bedroom and stay as quiet as possible. She answers the door and 2 SS officers come in and are like, where's Captain Beck? And she's like, how should I know? And they're like, what do you mean? And she's like, he doesn't tell me what he's doing. Don't you guys want to keep your secrets and shit like that? Like she's basically throwing it back at them, being like, why would I know where he is? And they're like, when's the last time you saw him? And she's like, it was a couple of days ago, you know. He had told me that there was a pilot that he was looking for, and he'd come home and he was very flustered. I guess it was that night he came home and was flustered, and then he looked like he had an idea and said, I know where he is. And he went off on his motorcycle, and I haven't seen him since then. And they were like, suspicious. So they brought her in for questioning into that hotel that's in the center of town that like the whole high command area is.
Mm-hmm.
And she's interrogated by a very, very scary man, the Sturmbannführer.
Mm-hmm.
And while he interrogates her, he searches her for weapons and is a little handsy with that search. And I'm like, that's real gross. But during that whole time, Vienne doesn't break. She sticks to the story of, he went out to look for the pilot. I haven't seen him since. I don't know what you want from me. And then the Sturmbannführer is like, oh, so there's a vacancy in your home.
Oh, no.
And she's like, what? And he said, I've been looking for a new place to billet. So I think I'm going to move in. So we are very quickly reminded that as awful as Beck was, it could have always been much, much worse. So he moves in. Then it cuts to Isabel healing in like their little safe house in the free zone, and Gaetan is there and he's watching over her, and there is actually a very, very beautiful scene of the two of them finally
all being like lovey-dovey, blah blah blah, I love you.
Well, Gaetan never tells Isabel that he loves her, at least not during this scene, and Isabel does at one point. The two of them get intimate, and there was this really funny moment because like she'd been healing and like it really hurt in her shoulder, obviously, because that's where she was shot, and she had finally had enough strength to go and take a bath in a separate room, and she comes back into the room wearing nothing but a towel, and the way that it's described, it's like he went very still and he like would not take her, and he's like, Isabel, don't do it. And then she removes her towel and he's like, God damn it, Isabel. And then she's like, you should consider yourself lucky, Gaetan. Normally I would have made you jump through hoops to see me naked. And he's like, then why are you doing this? And she's like, because I could die tomorrow, Gaetan. I want to love you. You don't have to say anything because I know that you love me. Even though you won't say it, I get it. So let's just make love because I want to, and because who knows what tomorrow brings. And so they do, and it's very sweet. I'm like, oh, I love it. And then a couple weeks later, when she's finally healed enough, they start going back from the free zone back to the occupied zone. And during that time, first of all, they find out that Germany and the Nazi Party have decided that there is no longer going to be a free zone. There is just going to be occupied France, and that this whole thing of splitting the country in half was a joke, and the Vichy government is a joke, and all that kind of stuff. And so that's obviously very concerning. But also during that time, Gaetan tells Isabel about what the meeting was supposed to be about in Caraveau the night that she found the pilot.
Yeah.
Because
the night she ruined everyone's plans.
Yes. So that night, so he tells her that the reason why they were going to meet was that Gaetan wanted to tell them that he was leaving the Free French network, basically, or Paul Levy's network. And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, it's not that I don't believe in the cause. I do. It's just that I don't feel like we're doing enough here. I feel like my services as a criminal are going to be suited much better with this like guerrilla warfare group that he found.
Which is what I thought they were going to end up linking up with the whole time.
Yeah, so Gaetan does. Isabel doesn't. Isabel stays with the Free French network. And he basically said, it's going to be dangerous. We're going to be blowing up bridges. We're going to be doing all this kind of crazy stuff. And I might never see you again. And so she's like, all the more reason that you should tell me that you love me, bitch. And he's like, no. So Isabel and Gaetan part ways, and she goes back to basically, she's still recovering for a bit, but eventually is like, I'm going to be back to climbing mountains pretty soon and working with the Nightingale project. And then I believe it was somewhere around here, I'm not really sure, there was like this weird other interjection with the old woman. I can't remember where it happened, but there was an interjection with the old woman where she was at the airport and she was waiting for her flight. She meets a teenager and starts talking to this teenager because, you know, the teenager's running away, and the old woman's like, I guess I'm running away too. And then, of course, her son comes to the airport and says, what the fuck, Mom? What was that message that you left on my answering machine? And she's like, I just wanted you to know where I was going. I didn't mean that you needed to come here, and you're not going to convince me to stay. And he's like, okay, fine. If I can't convince you to stay, then I'm coming with you. And she's like, what? And he was like, you can't stop me. I'm an adult. I can buy my own plane ticket.
I can buy my own plane tickets.
And she's like, did you get a seat next to me? And he was like, no, Mom, that's kind of ridiculous because it was so last minute, but I got us on the same plane. And she's like, oh, okay. And then during this time, she was talking about how she's eventually going to have to tell him everything, and that we now kind of find out that he never knew about her involvement in the war. So that's why he was surprised when he was showing her the letter and being like, is it for Dad? Because he was very aware of his dad's involvement in the war, but clearly had never known that his mom did anything in the war. And during this time, she was like, that's maybe my fault because, I never told him that I was involved in the war in any way. And, I think that's the difference between men and women, where men will just go on and talk about it and women just get over it. And I was like, that's so fucking sassy and I love it. But I found that odd for Isabel to not talk about. I mean, at the same time, Isabel's been able to keep it a secret very well this entire time.
Mm-hmm.
But you would think there's some part of her that's still always going to be a little bit impetuous and a little bit dramatic and selfish and attention seeking. So it's kind of weird that after the war ended, she's not like, hell yeah, bitches, I helped these pilots over the mountains.
I think something else happened to this person to say, I want to leave this all behind.
That's true, because she does eventually go to America, and she calls, her home in Oregon her safe place, her sanctuary, and it's been her sanctuary for 50 years. So basically since the war ended. So, it is a lot. But at the very end of this chapter, when she's talking about how women don't talk about it, they just get over it, she said something about all of the things that she had done, in the war, and all the things that her sister had done. And she never, this was really the first time that as the old woman, she really acknowledged having a sister. And it was the first time in the entire book, because we don't see the old woman very often. And every time that we've seen her so far, right after her, there would be a chapter about Vienne. But then now, right after she mentions having a sister, it was a chapter about Isabel. So I thought that was, and I'm like, Kristin Hannah, I'm getting very confused about who the old woman was. I was so confident, about halfway through the book, I was like, I am 120,000% sure that it's Isabel. And
she changes up the format on you.
And then she's changing the format, and I'm not really sure how this is supposed to work. But not only is she changing the format, but she is showing growth and development within a lot of her characters, and especially with Vienne, where I'm like, Vienne's starting to get a little bit sassy with shit, and Vienne's starting to use the same language as the old woman about how people are gone and things like that. And so I'm like, I don't know. And so I was going back and forth for a very long time about who this old woman was. I'm going to talk about Vienne because I don't remember where that little interjection was with the old woman actually showed up. But I do know that after that one, it went back to talking about Isabel for a little bit. But I'm going to talk about Vienne because I don't remember where else all that kind of stuff happened. So the Sturmbannführer is now living with her. When he first moved in, immediately he notices that there's a second child. And he's like, that's odd. Wolfgang only mentioned one child. Why didn't he mention this other one? And Vienne's like, why would he mention any children in this house? And the Sturmbannführer is like, you're suspicious. And she's like, okay, I still don't know where he is, because she doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
She, for legal reasons, she doesn't, but also she's like, I actually don't know, because Didier and Henri took care of it. And Henri at one point did kind of reach out to Vienne and said, we took care of it, you don't need to worry about it. So after the Sturmbannführer moves in, Vienne is out and about getting her rations. She's also concerned because, again, Beck was her only line to food.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I don't think the Sturmbannführer is going to really give me anything in this situation. So she's like, I've got to figure something out. But she's in the ration lines. And of course, there's more roundups of people, and they are happening more and more publicly. And she sees this family getting separated. And the mother of this family knows Vienne. And she looks at Vienne and she's like, Vienne, please take my children. And Vienne's like, of course, yes, absolutely. Doesn't even question it. She's like, yes, I will take your children. And the older of the children is like, no, Mom, I'm not leaving you. And she's like, yes, I need you to stay here because you've seen what's been going on. And he's like, no, Mom, I'm not leaving you. But the younger one doesn't know what's going on. The younger one's 3 maybe, but is willing to go with Vienne and stuff like that. And so then the mom and the older child are taken away. So Vienne goes back home and, of course, runs into the Sturmbannführer. And he's like, whose child is this now? And Vienne does a little fib and says that the kid had typhoid because there was
They're
this...
like, don't touch him.
Yeah. Was it typhoid or tuberculosis, something like that? And she had heard a rumor that especially the SS officers were very afraid of getting sick, especially, I think it was tuberculosis that they were really afraid of. And so he immediately jumped back and he's like, that kid can't stay here if he's got tuberculosis. And so she thinks that the only place that she thinks to take him is to the church. And she'd visited this church earlier on, right after she had given Beck the list of names, and then everybody had gotten fired, and she was like, I need to seek forgiveness. She had gone to this church. The mother superior there is basically like a second mother to her. And so she brings the boy to the church and asks the mother superior, can you take care of this boy? And the mother superior is like, where are his parents? And she's like, his parents are Jewish and they were deported. And the mother superior is like, yeah, we can hide him here. And you should start finding other children and seeing if you can hide them here.
Interesting.
And Vienn's like, oh, I can't. How could I do that? How could I like go up and like basically just take people's children from them? And she's like, all you have to do is ask them if they've seen the roundups and ask them to make the choice. And if they don't want you to take their children, then fine, don't. But a lot of them are going to act just like that mother, and they're going to ask you to protect their children. And she's like, okay, I guess this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to see if I can hide Jewish children in a church, because who's going to think to look for Jewish children in a church, right? In a Catholic church anyways.
Well, they might be able to make the argument like, they're too young for converting them or something like that. And
there's also an orphanage that is attached to the church, because that is also a common thing that was in the 40s. So you can just say that their parents died of, whatever. Like, that's not that hard of a narrative to spin. And then the mother superior also solves another one of Vienn's problems and says, and I suppose we're going to need a teacher for the kids at this orphanage.
Oh.
And Vienn's like, I might just know a teacher who's looking for a job because I was fired from the last one. But the mother superior does say, we're going to have to come up with new identities for these kids because the Germans will come looking for any Jewish children, so they can't be whatever their original names are. And you're going to have to get false papers to like back that up, because even if they're orphans, they're going to have papers.
She's like, how can I find the papers?
And Vienn's like, how is that my responsibility?
How's that my problem?
And the mother superior is like, you're the one that's getting the children, Vienne. It's your responsibility. And she's like,
I wouldn't get him if you didn't ask me to.
So Vienne then goes and pays a visit to Henri at his hotel that he runs, that is also swarming with Nazis. And she goes up to the front desk and he comes out with like a tray of coffees for some Germans and whatever. And he's like, Madame Mauriac, you're here about a room for your father, right? And she's like, yes, I am here about a room for my father who is going to visit for a few days. And he's like, I think I have the perfect room. Let me show it to you so that we're sure that it's to your satisfaction. And she's like, yeah. So then he brings her to the private room. Like, Henri, fucking great guy. So slick about it.
Well, if it's a high class like establishment already, they were already doing sleazy stuff like that.
I love high class and sleazy in the same realm.
Yeah, it's the two sides of the same coin.
That's funny. So he brings her into this private room where they can speak freely and everything like that. And she's like, I understand that I don't know everything that Isabel did, but I understand that she didn't run away to Paris to go see a boy, like she said. I understand that you and Gaëtan and Didier were helping her in that in some way. And Henri tells her at this point that Isabel is safe. And the two of them have like a little bit of a heart-to-heart about how they were never really able to be sisters, or that they were never really close as sisters. And Henri is like, I think you'll be able to tell her that you're sorry for what you said about like never wanting to see her again. And I think that she understands why you said it, and you'll have an opportunity when this war is over one day to get through that. And she's like, I really, really hope so. And she's like, I need a favor from you, though, because I get that you were involved with some shady shit as far as resisting the Nazi agenda. I need false papers for a child. And he's like, I don't know. I can talk to the person that I know that forges papers, but like, you should learn how to forge yourself. I can give you blank ones. Use them sparingly, because I don't know when the next time I'm going to be able to give you stuff is, but I can work something out, but like, you should learn how to forge, basically. And she's like, shit. So now I'm kidnapping children, sort of. I am going to be a school teacher, which is what I'm trained to do. I'm going to be like doing all this kind of stuff. And now on top of it all, I'm going to be a forger. Excellent. Yeah. Love it. With the Sturbenführer living under my own roof.
Yeah. I was like, with the guy in charge of the whole town in my house.
Yeah, excellent. And he's like, I'm sorry, that's the best that I can do. And so they part ways and she goes home. The Sturbenführer keeps looking at Vienne like she's up to something. He thinks he is very suspicious of her. I don't know if he's suspicious that she had something to do with Beck's disappearance or if he thinks she's doing something nefarious, but he is very much suspicious of her. And he's also very cruel. There's a lot of scenes where it's like he will have her dump an entire pot of coffee down the drain just so that she can't have any of it and all that kind of stuff. And it's like really cruel stuff. But the biggest thing that he continues to be suspicious of is Daniel, who is Rachel's son, Ari, but you know, he does go by Daniel now, and he kind of has forgotten a little bit because he was like 3 when his mom was taken away. So he's been trained well enough by this point. So we'll leave that on the back burner for a second. One thing that she does do is that she does practice forging in her Bible, which I think is excellent. She looks at her own like legal documents, starts seeing like how they all look, and starts like practicing writing them, like the names, the words, all that kind of stuff, because she's like, I am going to have to get very good at this for whatever children I'm able to save. And she does that in her Bible. And then she thinks about how if this is going to continue happening where families are going to become separated, there has to be a way to put the pieces back together, especially for kids that are so young, like the one that she just dropped off with the Mother Superior, that they're not going to remember their family necessarily. So she was like, there has to be a way to reunite them once this is all over. So she has this really risky but like necessary system of writing down their real names on one list, their like new identities on another list, and then like I think their family's name or like their, you know, parents on another list, and then keeping the 3 lists hidden and separate from each other so that you can't solve the puzzle with just any one piece and stuff like that. So she keeps one in the bottom of a like tin of nails, one in the barn's cellar kind of thing, and then one somewhere else. Like, so she like hides them. A few days later, she's again in the ration queues, and Henri happens to be walking by at one point, and he's like, oh, Madame Mauriac, I have this loaf of bread for you. It's my mother's like special recipe or something. And he's like, it's a special loaf of bread kind of thing. And she's like, okay. And she holds it and realizes that he hollowed out the bread, and that's where the
He put the papers
in there and whatever. And so he hands her the bread, and he's like, this might be the last time that we see each other for a long time. And she's like, well, thank you for the bread. I really appreciate it. She goes home that day, and the Sturbenführer is in quite a rage because recently that rebellion group that Gaetan had joined had been making quite a lot of waves and was really disrupting stuff. Also, the Allied forces were making a lot of progress in North Africa, which was not fun for the Germans, of course. So he's irritated, and he is like, what were you doing talking to the communist Henri? And she's like, nothing. And she was hoping that he wouldn't look at, because like she had a basket, and she was like, I hope he doesn't look at the basket, because yeah, the bread's in there and there's other stuff in the bread, but like, I don't know how much scrutiny he would go through stuff with. And he's like, I think you're up to something. And she's like, I'm not. He's very suspicious of Vienne. He's suspicious of Daniel. He was looking at Daniel, and he's like, he doesn't look like you. And Vienne's like, yeah, he was the son of my husband's cousin or whatever. So it's like, he's not mine and stuff. But he's like, well, what does your husband look like? And she's like, dude, like he is who we're saying he is. And he was like, I don't know if I believe that. And she's like, well, I've got the papers to prove it. And he's like, interesting. I think there's something fishy about Daniel, and I think that we should kick Daniel out. And she's like, no. And he's like, what are you willing to do to convince me that he is who he says he is? And she's like, I would do anything to protect Daniel. And this is where the story becomes
even more difficult. For quite some time, Vienne endures not just the cruelty, but endures physical and emotional and sexual abuse during this time. He very much abuses her to ensure that Daniel
state. He's like, I won't ask you any more questions about Daniel if I can satisfy myself here. And so she's like, fine. And so that happens. There is also a point after that where Sophie asks Vienne why she lets that happen, because Sophie's like, I hear it and I know what's going on. Like every time that you rush me and Daniel out of the room, I know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And Vienne's like, I'm sorry that you know about it because you're so young, but I have to do it to protect you guys. And Sophie's like, I wish we could kill him. And Vienne's like, me too.
Oh, so I think we now know who the old lady is.
Who do you think the old lady is?
It is Vienne.
Maybe. Who knows? Well, we'll see. Well, yep, we'll know soon enough, because the next thing that we'll talk about is Isabel. When she finally is feeling healed enough to take a hike over the Pyrenees, she gathers the airmen that she can and goes to Madame Babineau's house again, like she's done every single time. She's got them all gathered there. Everything seems to be going to plan. And then suddenly a squad of SS soldiers break into the house. And everybody freeze, like, the jig is up, we got you, and you're all being arrested. And so Isabel's arrested and is taken to, I think, to Paris. I'm not really sure where. And she's in a really tricky situation. They interrogate her, of course. And as they're interrogating her, they are like, you work with the Nightingale. Who's the Nightingale? Who is he? And she is like mildly laughing to herself, being like,
it's Gaetan.
She's like, these fuckers are so stupid. They could look the Nightingale right in the eyes and not know that they're talking to her, because they obviously assume it's a man and not her. She is the Nightingale. She's the one who set up the escape route. She's the one who set up the escape route. They called it the Nightingale because of her and all of that kind of stuff. Like, she has been going by the Nightingale, and she's been told by several people to be careful, that maybe she should slow down. Her contact with the British consulate has been saying, maybe you should stop. Gaetan had been telling her maybe she should stop. Henri was saying, maybe you should slow down. Even Vienne was like, she needs to learn how to be afraid and like to stop, because she is doing so much, whatever it is that she's doing. And Henri was like, have you met your sister? She's not gonna stop.
Yeah.
And so she remembers way back from when she first joined the French movement, the Free French movement, that she needs to hold out for 2 days. 2 days so that the rest of the Free French network can disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was first told that, she's like, 2 days isn't that long. That's okay. She was severely tortured. And it is pretty graphic, the descriptions of what happened to her. Probably the most alarming one to me was when, they obviously stripped her of her clothing and beat her and whipped her and did all that kind of stuff. But then they locked her in a refrigerator, which really stressed me out. She was very disoriented a lot of the time. She didn't know how much time had passed. And so she's like, I don't know how long I can go without saying the truth about all of this stuff. But I don't know if it's been 2 days yet. I don't know. So she just assumed that it hadn't been 2 days. During this time, word had obviously spread through the rest of the network that Isabel and Madame Babineau and all of them had been arrested. And that included, because her dad was part of that network, her dad was told about this, and he was very, very upset. So he goes to Caraveau to basically say goodbye to Vienne, and he gives her a letter. I didn't cry about this during the book, but now I'm like, oh, this is so sad. He gives her a letter that he tells her to wait to read until she's with Isabel again. And he basically is like, I'm sorry that I was a shit father for your whole lives. I wanted to be better, but I couldn't. And I'm glad that you're safe, and I'm glad that you've been keeping your head down and not doing anything, but Isabel's been arrested and I'm going to go take care of it. And Vienne is like, sure, I've been keeping my head down too. Yep, we'll say that that's definitely what I've still been doing. Yep. But she recognizes that he is basically going to sacrifice himself. Around this same time, because of all of the successes by the Allied forces, as well as the guerrilla warfare groups like the one that Gaetan had joined, the Nazis had been very aggressive in their displays of the executions that had been happening through town. At one point, before her father came to visit her, she'd been walking through town and there were like dozens of men hanging from the lampposts just down the main street.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was Henri. So her dad delivers this letter and says, that he loves her, that he's going to take care of it, and he just wants Vienne and Isabel to be safe.
We can pause for a little bit.
Again, I didn't cry when I read this, but maybe I was just so desensitized by that point. So he goes back to Paris. He basically like storms into wherever they're holding Isabel and says, "I'm the one you're looking for. I'm the Nightingale," because his last name is Nightingale. Although I don't know if he had a false name too, because the whole time Isabel, while she's being tortured, is like, "I'm Juliet Gervais." And they're like, "And you know nothing of the Nightingale." And like, they're like, "Who is he?" And she's like, "I don't know anything about birds." And I was like, that's such a great response, Isabel. I don't know anything about birds.
Know anything about birds? Leave me alone.
Clearly she hadn't played Wingspan. But then she's brought to one day she's let out of the refrigerator and is brought to an interrogation room where she sees her dad. And he says, "I am the Nightingale." And she's like, "No." Then she tries to save him and says, "No, I'm the Nightingale." And they're like, a woman couldn't climb the Pyrenees. And so they take her father out to the courtyard of wherever they're at. And at least they, I guess, do him the dignity of the firing squad.
Mm-hmm.
But Isabel, of course, is basically forced to watch through the window while her dad, who she's become so close with over the last few years, she's forced to watch him get executed.
Mm-hmm.
And then they tell her, "Well, you were working with him, so you are now a prisoner of war." Or not a prisoner of war, but you're going to be sent to the labor camps. And she's like, "Excellent, awesome, this is great." But they still believe that she's Juliet Gervais and all of that. So she gets her papers. They put her in this oversized gown because I don't know what they did with her clothes, but she'd been naked this whole time, basically. And then they put her in shoes that were too small for her, put her on one of those cattle trains, and she happened to be placed in the same car as Madame Babineau. And the two of them have this little heart-to-heart on the train. She's like, "I feel like there's a possibility I'm going to die here. If I do, I feel like at least one person should know my real name." And she's like, "My name is Isabel Rossignol." And Madame Babineau's like, "I know." And Isabel's like, "I never told you that," like, and the Free French wouldn't have. And she's like, "Isabel, I was best friends with your mom. You look just like your mother. I know who the fuck you are." And she's like, "Oh, and you didn't say anything." And she's like, "I knew the name of the game. I knew what we were doing here, but it's good to know. Like, thank you for telling me," and stuff like that. So she goes to the labor camps where she is put through even more torture. And throughout this time, because she's being starved, because she's being tortured and overworked, she's very, very confused. She's starting to lose her mind a little bit. Along the same time, we're nearing the end of the war. We're getting to like the 1944, even into 1945, like the early part of it, because the war ended in 1945. And Vienne has so far saved 11 children. And this is the part of the book that I get kind of frustrated with because it feels kind of rushed, because like it took us ages to get through 1942. And I want to say that it was like late 1944 or even 1945 that Isabel was captured. And then very suddenly we're like at the end of the war. And I'm like, what happened? At the one hand, I didn't want to hear about all the torture that was going on. But on the other hand, I'm like, this just feels rushed and weird, because then very suddenly Antoine comes home because he escaped his prisoner of war camp. This was right around the time that like the Germans were recognizing that their cause was like circling the drain, that they were losing the war kind of thing. So the Sturmbannführer had very abruptly moved out of the house and stuff like that. And Antoine comes home and Vienne goes through this very long like ordeal of, how do I explain who Daniel is? And how do I explain the fact that I am pregnant? Because the Sturmbannführer had his way with her for like a year, I want to say. And she was pregnant by him. And she's worried that Antoine is going to believe that maybe it wasn't rape. Maybe it was something that she wanted. And then she was like, I know that he wouldn't really ever believe that. But like, if he knows, maybe he's going to start thinking that. I don't really know what I want to do about this, all this kind of stuff. So the two of them do eventually come to this agreement that they're just not going to talk about what happened, because he also was a prisoner of war and was in not a great situation either. And his arm was like permanently broken or like disfigured in a way because it had been broken at one point. And the two of them decided to like basically rebuild their family. But like the two of them had to learn how to love each other again, because they are different people than how they started the war, both of them. The war finally ends, and Vienne goes to the Red Cross in Paris to look for Isabel, because she's like, I know that she was arrested, but I don't know. And she, of course, gave them the name Isabel Rossignol. And they're like, we don't have anybody with that name, but that doesn't mean anything. She did, because she didn't know that her name was Juliet. Yeah. And then she's also like, I have a list of 11 Jewish children that need to be reunited with their families if possible, including Daniel, Ari. It's there that she was told that Rachel didn't survive.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, okay, well, Daniel can stay with me then. But she's like, I've got all these other kids that are at this orphanage that should be reunited with their families. And she's like, I know it's not much. It's only 11 kids. And then somebody was like, well, that's 11 that probably would have died otherwise. And they're like, well, we'll look into finding Isabel for you. You know, again, there's a lot that we kind of have to go through, and they're still closing some of the camps and stuff like that. So if she's, you know, we'll find her. Maybe. So she goes home, tries to live a normal life, and is just anxious waiting to hear about Isabel. And then she gets a knock on her door, and there's two rabbis that are there, and they're like, we are here for Ari de Champlain. We are told that he lives here. And she's like, what do you want with him? And they're like, well, he has some relatives in America that want to have him live with them. And she's like, but I love him like my own son, and I'm, you know, wanting to take care of him, and and he's my only line to Rachel basically now. And they're like, we understand that, and we're really happy that you love him, but you need to understand that there was an entire generation of our people who have been just eradicated. And so we can't have you, a Catholic woman, raise him, even if you promise to raise him Jewish. Like, he needs to be with his own people, because we need to be able to come back from this. And he's, you know, he's young and he's not going to necessarily understand, but like, we need this. And she's like, well, when does he leave? And they're like, right now. And so she also hasn't explained to him this whole situation. And so she lets him leave with a picture of herself and Rachel, and like it's a very sad goodbye. And she's like, well, can I write to him? Can I they're like, no, unfortunately, this needs to be kind of like a pretty clean cut. We don't want him to have this like back and forth or like this half identity. Like we don't want him to think of you as his mom either, and all this kind of like it was explained very well in the book. For me, I'm doing probably a poor job of explaining that, but like it made sense when they were like, unfortunately, no, we can't have you like contact him. So it was just sad all around there, because then, you know, there's like, she loses him too. Isabel is finally released from the camp that she is in. She survived. She's very like delirious a lot of the time. She's extremely emaciated, and she and Madame Babineau both survived and are like, we made it and we got out, and you know, it's over. She's held in a hospital for a little while and then sent to live with Vienne, because that was the whole situation. Mm-hmm. Vienne tries her very best to help Isabel and is like, hey, like, you need to eat some stuff. I've got some bone broth for you that the doctor says that you should be able to keep down, but Isabel can really only eat like a couple tablespoons without throwing up, because that's what happens when you starve your body. Then eventually it starts to reject food. And Isabel's doing okay. And there's a day when she and Vienne are sitting out in the backyard. Again, I didn't cry at this part in the book, but I'm crying about it now. They're sitting out in the backyard, and Isabel says, I think it's enough for me, V. She's like, I think I've lived a good life, and my life is enough for me. And then I don't remember if it's the same day or if it's another time that they're sitting out in the backyard, but Vienne gets another knock at her door. It's Gaetan. And he's also like a little bit thinner than the last time that Vienne remembered seeing him. All in all, he's still like, it's still very obviously Gaetan. And Isabel goes to like primp her hair and then realizes she doesn't have any because reasons. And he says, oh, you're still as beautiful as ever. And the two of them, he, like kind of helps Isabel to her feet and holds her up. They share a kiss. He tells her that he loves her. And she died. Because her body just gave out.
Take your time. It's okay.
Of course, we didn't totally find out all of this until we had finally cut back to the old woman, and the old woman explains this in her speech at the reunion, because she arrives a little bit late because
she flew overnight.
Yeah, she flew overnight, and they got there, and when they landed, they went exploring the city for a bit, and then they went to the reunion thing, and so they were a little bit late, and they invite her up to the stage. They don't announce her name because at this point, we have figured out that it's Vienne, but Kristin Hannah had still been playing the game of, is it actually Vienne or is it Isabel? Like, who is it? And we hadn't found out that Isabel had died yet. And Vienne goes up to the stage, the old woman, gives her speech, and she was saying something about like her sister. And so then it's in her speech that we're like, okay, so Vienne is the old woman. Interesting. And then she describes that Isabel died on that day in Gaetan's arms. And then after her speech, she feels kind of like overwhelmed. Her son is like, Mom, I feel like there's a lot that we need to talk about, because I didn't know any of that shit about what Aunt Isabel did. And I didn't know about all the shit that you did and all this kind of stuff. Like, what the fuck is this? And again, Vienne's like, maybe some other time, kid, I'll tell you about it. And her conversation is interrupted by an old man with very sharp, almost wolf-like features, which I don't know if you remember, but that was how Isabel first described Gaetan. So it's Gaetan, and he's like, hey, Vienne, it's been a long time. And she's like, oh my God, you're still alive. And he's like, so are you? And she's like, it's really good to see you. And he's like, I never stopped loving your sister. And she's like, well, you fucking have better loved her, because she loved you a lot. But he introduced Vienne to his daughter that he named Isabel. And Vienne was like, she would have loved that. Like, she was that kind of self-centered that she would have loved having somebody named after her. And she was like, well, it's really good to see you, Gaetan. She's like trying to make her way to like her table because there's supposed to be a dinner or whatever. And she's stopped again by a younger guy, somewhat around the age of her son.
Is this Ari?
It's Ari.
Hey.
And he's like, I never forgot about you. And he had the picture of Vienne and Rachel. He thanked her for everything that she did for him, as well as the other children that she hid, and, was able to reunite them with somebody in their families. So that was the end of the book. And I'm done. I'm worn out, and I mean, I'm not kidding. It has been weeks since I have finished it, and I I didn't cry while I was reading it, but man, thinking about it makes me real sad.
You've been like crying for like 10 minutes straight and trying to hold it in.
Yep. I need a big break. I need to not be in anything like World War II for a while in my life. I mean, it's been nice because I actually haven't really been reading much in this interim while we've been waiting to record this. But yeah, that was the book. And I'm sorry that there weren't like passages for this last part, but I don't think I would have been able to like get through some of those passages.
I'm not entirely sure it's needed.
I mean, at that point, the rest of it was just plot, and I can just kind of tell you what happens. The good writing pieces where there's like imagery and all that kind of stuff kind of disappeared in this last part of the book.
At first, I was like really quite excited, especially towards the middle point of this book. I was kind of feeling like we were angling more towards a spy espionage type book where we explore the life that you would live to be a spy. And then as we progressed, the plot changed so quickly, it felt more like a tour of the time period and showing the two sides of the suffering that can happen, and just kind of like brings you throughout the whole time period. Because it felt like Isabel lived like 3 different lives, 4 different lives, and then Vienne was just suffering. She was suffering a lot the whole time.
She never had a break. I think for me, the writing in this was very nice. I liked that there was a lot of like poetic elements to the way that Kristin Hannah wrote. I liked her writing style. I liked the way that she was telling stories. I liked the way that she built these characters to have flaws. Like, I remember being so conflicted about how to feel about Vienne, because it's like when she wrote the list of names for Beck, I was like, damn, Vienne, I don't want to be your friend anymore. But like earlier, I was like, she's being kind of reasonable. Like, I don't know. And like Isabel's being kind of crazy. But then I was like, nah, Isabel did need to be that crazy. Like, there needed to be somebody to stand up for what was right, you know? So it was difficult. These characters are dynamic and they're very, I think in my creative writing classes, we talked about like round versus flat characters. And flat characters are the ones that like are pretty easy to read because like they just are as they present, versus the round ones are like 3-dimensional and there's multiple sides to them and all that kind of stuff. So there were multiple things about almost all of the characters. I want to say that like the Sturbenführer was like a very cartoonish villain, as far as like he was just a bad guy. I did not like him at all, and you're not supposed to, but like the fact that we kind of got to a point where we could sort of like Beck, you know, like to show that not all of the Nazis were these like creepy people, which also is what makes it scarier, because it makes it be like anybody could fall into that kind of a system of thinking.
Yeah, I felt like the author did a relatively good job with most of their characters, showing you the human condition.
Yes.
So I thought they did a really good job with that.
Yeah. The one thing that I didn't necessarily like about this was, as far as there's one big plot hole that doesn't get explained, and that is the trunk of things. Because Vienne said she sold all that shit.
Oh, yeah. And like,
and it's never like, mentioned again.
Where was all the stuff that Isabel had? She didn't have anything.
Yeah.
She was in a camp.
Yeah.
And the stuff that was at her father's house got raided.
Probably, yeah.
Because he was executed.
Yeah. And then
like, where's all this stuff coming from?
Yeah. And then on top of that too, when did Vienne ever hear the name Juliette Gervais? Because at the beginning of the book, when she finds the photograph, she's like, it had been a long time since I had heard the name. It's just that we don't see it happen. I'm sure that there are many spots that we could have figured it out. Like that the people at the hospital were told that her name was Juliette Gervais, but she knows that it's Isabel or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, It could have been a lot of things, but for me, I was just like, why didn't we get to see her know that that was what Isabel's name was?
And I feel like Isabel shouldn't have died. Because once you've been rescued and you're in the hospital, they don't just let you go if you're still emaciated.
They did, though. That was the thing that I was like I was very confused by that. But I don't know if it was that they were like making room for other people and she had a place to go or what it was. But
I don't. I'm like, that was like, a cop out a little bit. Just to prove a point, like, and then she died after I'm like, they were at a hospital.
Yeah.
She should have been fine. But I felt like this was just a narrative choice.
But I also do think that there were a lot of people that died after being rescued from the
died
camps.
like that day.
I was thinking she was going to die a lot earlier. So like the fact that they still had her die kind of bothered me. And the fact that it was just that like her body gave up kind of stuff, which was really sad because of all the characters to just give up, Isabel wasn't one of them. And so it's frustrating that like she had to deal with that kind of like betrayal from her own body at the end when everything was like good again, when Gaetan finally admitted that he loved her and everything like that. That just, I get that it was poetic, but it did also kind of like, I was like, that was kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, if he wanted that, you should have had him find her at the camp.
Yeah.
If that's the ending you wanted, it should have been him finding her at the camp with his guerrilla group and her dying then, not after everything is completed. And
the other thing that I was kind of just sad, it felt like let's just throw this in there to make it more sad. If you're like, well, what happened to Sophie? Because like, why is there only mention of Julian the son, which Julian is also their father's name, so she named the baby Julian that she had from the Sterbenführer, which Antoine also kind of figured out. Like he figured out what happened, but they just never talked about it. But like, anyways, so if you're like, well, where was Sophie in all of this with the old woman? Sophie had apparently died a few years prior to from like cancer, and Vienne also has cancer as an old woman, and that's what she's dying of and why she's been moved to an assisted living facility. And I was just like, it feels like a quick fix for like why you haven't been mentioning Sophie throughout the rest of the. I'm like, I don't know. The ending could use some work is my thought.
Yeah, I feel like this almost could have been 2 separate books.
I think the ending felt very rushed. Like it was just very suddenly. We were jumping through years. There, like I think she skipped one of the years. I think she skipped 1943. She didn't talk about anything at 1943. That was before the sexual abuse started happening to Vienne. Because like I could understand if it was that she didn't want to remember the sexual abuse kind of thing. Because like the way that I think about this is that this book is kind of her telling her son about what happened. Because she did say that she would eventually tell him, and so it's like it's going to be his way of finding out that his dad Antoine isn't his dad.
Yeah.
And she was like, there's just stuff I don't want to remember about the war. And I'm like, obviously she had to explain, to us, but I'm like, either you're wrong about the timeline about when that started or something, but like she skipped an entire year, and it really really bothered me when I found out that suddenly it's 1945, and I was like,
yeah, I was saying the 2 sisters could be 2 different books.
Oh, that would be interesting,
because they both go through a lot, and you can have a more succinct, thorough story and then running parallel,
because like they did intertwine with each other a couple times. Like there were a few times when their paths met. I don't know. I overall liked this book. I definitely have read other books about World War II that were also just as gut-wrenching and graphic with what they talk about, that I think told a better story. I do like your like description of how it's like a tour of the time period, and that we got to see a little bit of everything, as far as we got to see what it was like if you tried to comply and how you were still miserable. And we got to see what it was like to be on the inside of the resistance. We got to see what it was like inside the concentration camps. We got to see what it was like to have these families torn apart kind of thing. Like we saw everything, and we even saw what it was like to be on the wrong side of history, and to have to try to grapple with that. But then unfortunately, he kind of got the easy way out of
just being killed for being who
for being like kind of in a craze right there and like shooting at like it was in self-defense in both situations, like from Vianne's perspective and Isabel's. I'm like, I can see why both of them killed him, but I'm like, man, like I kind of would have loved to have seen him grapple with his position a little bit more. And I do wonder if he would have ever been brought to the point of actually run away kind of thing.
I feel like Vanessa's story could be a very good long form.
You mean Vienne?
Whatever. Vienne. Okay.
Oh, I'm leaving that in.
I feel like Vienne's story would be very good long form because she kind of stayed in the same place, and it was like a change of character over time and these horrible things happening to her. And Isabel's story could be broken down and be more concentrated on like, this is what it was like to cross these mountains multiple times and avoiding police. And then it can do another story. Like this could all be like 3 books, and it'd be very, very good.
Yeah.
But
it does feel like it's trying to fit too much
showing
into one
you
book.
all this stuff. Like, yeah. But overall, I thought the writing was really good. I just was excited for other types of stories that could be told. That like we were led into it. Like, okay, so this is this type of story. I'm gonna tease you with it. I'm like, well then, that's like a whole book right there that you could do.
Yeah. Anyways.
Where can people find us?
Are we gonna pick the next read?
Oh yeah! It's time to open the It's Me. Hi, I'm the TBR. It's me.
Oh my god, please don't ruin me with, I know 99% of my to be read list is really a lot. Sorry, I was talking during that, but that's fine. Oh, what is it? So the next read is Dreadful by Caitlin Rozakis, which from the title doesn't sound great. But I do know for a fact that this book, the only reason I bought it, I don't know anything about this book other than like when I go to a bookstore and I'm looking for a particular book, obviously there's a reason that I'm buying that book. But when I go to a bookstore and I let the books speak to me to see if I want to buy them, I will open up to a random page and I'll read a little bit because I want to see if I like the writing style, if I'm interested in what's going on without any context, if I can get down with what's going on with the characters. And I don't usually spoil anything for myself because since I don't have the context, I can't remember reading that when I found the book. And the reason that I do that is because I've been burned too many times by the opening lines of books where sometimes they have a terrible opening line or a terrible opening like first chapter, but then the rest of the book is great. Or vice versa, where it has an amazing hook and it gets you and you're like, oh, what an interesting opening line. What an interesting first chapter. And then the rest of the book is terrible. So I've been burned too many times with that. So that's why I go and I'm like, I'm going to pick something in the middle. With this book, I think I probably did that. I probably picked out something in the middle. But I was like just flipping through and I did find the first page. And I remember the first line being like a banger of a first line. Which is why I only for the first line.
You just had this long spiel about being burned by the first line.
I know,
so you're gonna go by
but the first line of this book, it got me. So I'm excited for it, nervous because the title sounds dreadful. You see what I did there?
Wow. Low effort on that one.
So now people can find us on Facebook at A Pot of Sass and Sarcasm, however you find people on Facebook.
They can find us on Instagram
At A Pot of Sass.
They can send us an email.
apotofsass@gmail.com.
And they can find us on Patreon.
And donate if you're feeling so inclined at patreon.com/apotofsassandSarcasm, where I don't cry yet. Anyways, thank you so much for listening and for sticking through this really heavy tale. Trust me, we're right there with you with how heavy it was. I didn't think I could handle it, but I did. Barely. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We really appreciate it.
Hope you keep listening.
And we hope you stay sassy.
Later.